Hey there, history nerds. Welcome back to WTF History, where we dig into the wildest, most mind-blowing stories from the past that make you go, no way, that actually happened. Today, we're diving into a tale that's equal parts epic, tragic, and downright gruesome. It's the story of Philip II of Spain, the king who ruled an empire where the sun never set, only to meet an end so horrific it'll haunt your dreams. Picture a man who controlled half the world, reduced to a writhing, suffering wreck, devoured by disease, and, yep, you heard me, literal parasites. This isn't just a story about a king. It's a reminder that no matter how powerful you are, fate has a way of humbling you. So, grab a drink, get comfy, and let's step into the dark, twisted final days of one of history's most powerful men. Trust me, you're not ready for this. It's September 1598, and we're inside the Escorial. This massive palace monastery in Spain that's as much a fortress of faith as it is a royal residence. The air is thick, the corridors eerily quiet, except for the hushed whispers of physicians and the occasional groan echoing from the royal chamber. Inside, on a bed that's falling apart as fast as the man lying on it, is Philip II, King of Spain, Portugal, Naples, Sicily, and a chunk of the New World. This guy was the most powerful monarch of his time, the one who challenged England's Elizabeth I, built this very Escorial as a monument to his glory, and led the charge against the Protestant Reformation. But now, his body is a wreck. His hands, once steady enough to sign world-changing decrees, are gnarled claws, twisted by gout. His legs, swollen to twice their size with fluid, haven't moved in weeks. And the smell, oh man, the smell. It's so bad, so putrid, that even his most loyal servants cover their noses when they step into the room. This isn't some forgotten prisoner. This is the king, the guy who ruled an empire so vast the sun never set on it. So how'd he end up here, rotting alive, his body a battlefield of pain? To understand that, we need to go back and meet the man behind the crown. Born in 1527 in Valladolid, Philip was the son of Emperor Charles V, a guy who basically owned half of Europe and the Americas, and Isabella of Portugal, a princess who added even more clout to the family. From the moment he could talk, Philip was being prepped to rule. His dad was a warrior, always charging in a battle, but Philip? He was a different breed. They called him El Rey de los Papals, the king of papers, because this dude lived for paperwork. He'd spend hours in his study, scribbling notes, reading reports, and micromanaging an empire that stretched from Mexico to the Philippines. When Charles V got fed up with ruling and abdicated in 1556, Philip inherited the Spanish throne and a massive slice of the world. Then, in 1580, he pulled off a major power grab. After Portugal's king vanished in a disastrous battle, Philip, as the grandson of Portugal's King Manuel I, claimed the throne. With his army, led by the fearsome Duke of Alba, he crushed the opposition and became King of Portugal, uniting two of the world's biggest empires under one crown. This guy wasn't just playing the Game of Thrones. He was rewriting the rulebook. But Philip wasn't just about stacking titles. He was obsessed with his faith. He saw himself as God's enforcer, the guy chosen to keep Catholicism supreme. Under his rule, the Spanish Inquisition was in overdrive, hunting down heretics, Protestants, anyone who dared step out of line. At the same time, he had a softer side. He was a huge art collector, snapping up masterpieces like nobody's business. And he poured his heart into building the Escorial, this jaw-dropping mix of palace, monastery, and tomb that screamed, "I'm here, I'm powerful, and I'm God's guy." His personal life, though, total chaos. He married 4 times, first to his cousin Maria Manuela, who died giving birth to a son, Carlos, who later went off the rails and got locked up by his own dad. Then came Mary Tudor, aka Bloody Mary, who died without kids. His third wife, Elizabeth of Valois, gave him 2 daughters but died in childbirth. Finally, he married his niece, Anna of Austria. His niece, who gave him his heir, Philip III, and a few other kids, most of whom didn't survive childhood. Power, faith, and family drama. Philip's life was a wild ride. But the real storm was brewing inside his body. See, Philip was never the picture of health. Even as a young guy, he was plagued by gout, this brutal disease where uric acid builds up in your joints, forming crystals that make every movement feel like fire. Why? Because Philip lived a high life. Red meat, wine, all the stuff that screams, "I'm a king, and I eat like one." Gout was called the disease of kings for a reason, and Philip was its VIP. By his 60s, the attacks were relentless, mangling his hands and turning his knees and feet into torture zones. But gout wasn't the only thing coming for him. By 1590, at 63, he was hit with tertian fevers. Think malaria, with fever spikes every 3 days, and edema, where fluid builds up in your body, turning your legs into unrecognizable stumps. The guy who once sent armies across oceans was now trapped in his own skin, barely able to move. And that's when things started to get really ugly. By 1596, Philip's health wasn't just bad. It was a full-blown catastrophe. The gout that had tormented him for years was now a merciless enemy. His hands, once his tools for writing endless decrees, were so deformed he could barely hold a quill. For a guy who built his whole identity around being the ultimate bureaucrat, this was like losing his purpose. Imagine spending your life controlling an empire through paperwork, only to have your body say, "Not anymore." His legs were no better, swollen with edema to the point where they didn't even look human. Walking was a distant memory. Then came the fevers, hitting him like clockwork every 3 days. One day he's burning up, sweating through his sheets. The next, he's shivering with chills, and then it starts all over again. His immune system, worn down by years of gout and a rich diet, was throwing the towel. By 1598, his condition went from rough to straight-up apocalyptic. The edema spread everywhere, turning his whole body into a swollen, painful mess. The gout wasn't just in his hands and feet anymore. It was attacking his knees, elbows, even his spine. Every movement was agony, so he stopped moving altogether. That's when the nightmare really kicked into gear. Stuck in bed, Philip developed bed sores, deep, open wounds on his back, buttocks, and legs from lying still for so long. These weren't just uncomfortable. They got infected, turning into oozing, festering sores that attracted insects. Yeah, you heard that right. Insects. His mattress had to be perforated to let bodily fluids drain out, because moving him was impossible. The pain was too much. And then came the lice. A massive infestation of lice crawling all over his weakened, immobile body. In one of his last clear moments, Philip reportedly said something like, "This body that ruled half the world can't even control its own parasites." Can you imagine the irony? The guy who micromanaged an empire was now helpless against bugs. His servants, his doctors, even his closest courtiers could barely stand to be in the room because of the stench and the sight of their king being eaten alive by his own body. It was like something out of a horror movie. But this was real, and it was happening to the most powerful man on earth. What makes this even crazier is how Philip dealt with it. This was a guy who believed he was God's chosen warrior, the one destined to defend Catholicism against all odds. To him, this suffering wasn't just physical, it was a spiritual crucible. He saw it as a test, like he was living through his own personal purgatory. His priests wrote that he endured the pain with Christian devotion, like some kind of saint in training. Picture him lying there, clutching a crucifix in his mangled hands, whispering prayers through the delirium, believing every moment of agony was a step closer to redemption. It's haunting, right? A king who spent his life burning heretics and building monuments to God, now facing a trial that made him question what it all meant. His doctors? No help at all. They tried bloodletting and purges, medieval nonsense that just made him weaker. No antibiotics, no modern medicine. Just a slow, excruciating slide into the abyss, with only his faith to hold on to. Philip's downfall wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a seismic moment for his empire and the world. This was a man who'd spent decades trying to control everything. He fought the Protestant Reformation, sent the Spanish Armada against England's Elizabeth I, crushed revolts in the Netherlands, and unified Spain and Portugal. His empire was the ultimate power flex, stretching across oceans and continents. But as his body crumbled, so did his grip on power. In his final years, he had to rely on advisors. And let's be honest, most of them didn't have his strategic genius. Some historians think his failing health led to bad calls, like military flops and economic missteps that started Spain's slow decline. Others say his suffering made him softer, more open to peace deals, like the treaties he signed toward the end. Either way, his condition wasn't just a personal crisis. It was a crack in the empire's foundation. And the symbolism? It's heavy. In Philip's time, the king's body was seen as a mirror of the state itself. A strong king meant a strong kingdom. So imagine the shock of seeing the most powerful man in Christendom, God's anointed ruler, reduced to a trembling, lice-ridden invalid. It wasn't just his courtiers who were shaken. It was everyone who believed in the divine order. If a king like Philip could be brought so low, what did that say about God's plan? His suffering wasn't just a medical failure. It was a philosophical gut punch. People started whispering, if this can happen to him, what's the point of all this divine right of kings stuff? It was like the universe was saying, you thought you were untouchable? Think again. Yet Philip's faith never wavered. He didn't curse God or give up. Instead, he leaned into his suffering, seeing it as a chance to atone for his sins, maybe for the thousands burned by the Inquisition or for locking up his own son. In his lucid moments, he'd murmur prayers, holding that crucifix like it was his lifeline. His priest said he faced death with a kind of holy patience, which is wild when you think about what he was enduring. By July 1598, he'd been in agony for 2 years straight. 2 years of fevers, sores, and parasites. 2 years of being a king who couldn't even sit up. It's hard to fathom that kind of endurance, or what it must have felt like to know you're the most powerful man alive and yet completely powerless. By July 1598, Philip's condition was beyond hope. The bedsores were so bad, they were practically eating him alive. The infections were relentless, and the lice? They were everywhere. His body was a war zone, and he was losing. His physicians kept trying their medieval tricks, more bloodletting, more purges, but it was like throwing pebbles at a tsunami. Philip was slipping between feverish delirium and moments of sharp, painful clarity, where he'd look down at his broken body and probably wonder how it all came to this. The guy who'd spent his life signing orders to conquer the world couldn't even sign his own name anymore. His hands were too mangled, his strength too gone. The Escorial, his masterpiece, was supposed to be a symbol of eternal power, but now it was just the place where he was dying, surrounded by the trappings of glory he could no longer touch. His courtiers, the ones brave enough to stick around, watched in horror. They'd served a king who seemed larger than life, a man who'd taken on England, the Ottomans, and anyone who dared challenge his vision of a Catholic world. Now they were changing his sheets and trying not to gag. The lice infestation was so bad, it was like something out of a plague narrative. And yet, Philip didn't rage against his fate. He didn't shake his fist at the heavens. Instead, he turned inward, clinging to his faith like a drowning man clings to driftwood. His priest said he saw his suffering as a divine test, a chance to purify his soul before meeting his maker. Whether you buy that or not, it's hard not to respect the guy's resolve. Most of us would have been screaming into the void, but Philip was whispering prayers, clutching that crucifix, and waiting for the end. And the end did come, on September 13th, 1598, after 52 days of nonstop agony. 52 days. That's almost 2 months of lying in bed, with open wounds, fevers, and parasites crawling over him. When he finally passed, his face, twisted by pain for so long, reportedly relaxed, like he'd found peace at last. His body, that poor, tortured thing, was cleaned up as best they could manage and taken to the Escorial's royal crypt. The embalmers had a tough job, trying to restore some dignity to what was left of him. He was laid to rest in the very monument he'd built, a place meant to scream, I'm eternal. But now a reminder that no one escapes time. So here we are, at the end of Philip II's story. And it's time to unpack what it all means. His death wasn't just the end of a man. It was the end of an era. His son, Philip III, took over, but he was no Philip II. The new king wasn't into the whole king of papers vibe. Instead of diving into the bureaucratic grind, he handed the reins to favorites like the Duke of Lerma and focused on enjoying life. Maybe because he'd seen what the crown did to his dad. The empire Philip II left behind was still massive, but the cracks were showing. The Spanish Armada had flopped, the Netherlands were still a mess, and the economy was starting to wobble. The golden age of Spain was fading, and Philip's gruesome end felt like a metaphor for it all. The man who tried to control everything, religion, politics, the seas, couldn't control his own body. It's almost poetic in a twisted way. What is hardest about this story is how it strips away the myth of kingship. Philip's whole deal was that he was God's chosen, the guy anointed to rule the world. But watching him waste away, covered in sores and lice, made people question that whole divine right thing. If a king could suffer like that, what did it say about the order of the universe? His death was a wake-up call, a memento mori, a reminder that we're all just human, whether we're wearing a crown or begging in the streets. His courtiers, his subjects, even his enemies must have looked at his end and thought, if this can happen to him, what chance do the rest of us have? For us, looking back, Philip's story is more than just a gross-out tale of disease and parasites. It's a reminder that power, no matter how vast, has limits. Philip built an empire that reshaped the world, but in the end, he was just a man, fragile and fallible like the rest of us. His faith, his pain, his stubborn refusal to give up, it all paints a picture of a guy who faced the ultimate test and somehow kept going. So what do you think, folks? Was Philip a tyrant who got what was coming to him? Or a tragic figure who paid the ultimate price for his ambition? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if this story blew your mind, and subscribe to WTF History for more insane dives into the past. Until next time, keep questioning history, because the truth is always wilder than you think.